On this episode of Delivering Marketing Joy, we talk with Roger Burnett about fresh perspectives and trying new things. Hey everybody, it's time once again for another episode of Delivering Marketing Joy. I am your host, Kirby Hasseman, and joining me today is Roger Burnett. He's the Director of Sales from, give me the new company.
Legacy Global Sports, my friend.
Legacy Global Sports. Yeah, I told you we had to check my memory. I should have made a note. Sorry. So I'm excited about this. Roger and I have had the opportunity to talk a few different times, and Roger is an original thinker, and so I really appreciate you taking the time, Roger.
No pressure there.
Yeah, right? You know, so one of the things that occurs to me on the several times we've chatted is I think you're someone who's not afraid to try new things. And I think that's really important in business. But why do you think that's important?
Oh, gosh. I guess it's mostly from personal experience, Curb. I mean, dating back to the early part of my career, I found myself frequently being in sales during the time when technology was changing, I guess is the best way to put it. So as the selling organizations that I was a part of were evolving to meet the new technology that was capable in the marketplace, they needed somebody that was willing to go and learn it. And I sort of got tapped to do that. And I think may have been by accident at first, but I didn't specifically set out to take that path. But once I got on it, I realized that it was a great fit for me in the way that I like to learn and, be challenged by new things. So once you find yourself in that scenario, as is the case with almost any other organizational role, the minute that something even comes close to fitting that, they end up giving it to you, right? So even though it may have been somewhat by accident in the beginning, I found it to be a real a good fit for me when it came to my professional career.
Yeah, once you become the person who is willing to jump into new projects, you become that person. Once you become the tech guy, you become that person. Yeah. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So, on the other side of that, I would tell you that some of the things that you've got to ask yourself are, do you get bored easy at work? Are you often seeking a brand new challenge to keep you excited and energized about getting up and coming into the office on a day in and day out basis? And if you meet that criteria, then you're probably a little more predisposed to putting yourself in the position to try new things. But, you and I were talking about a particular book that we happen to both know about, which is the author's name is Carol Dweck, and she's a psychology professor that did a pretty significant amount of brain research into mindset, and this notion of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, and how that is somewhat nature-driven, but also is a learned behavior. And so for those people out there who don't see themselves in that way, what this book suggests is that you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into a specific mindset if you choose not to. And I would say, from someone who's spent a pretty significant part of his career doing the new thing, I would say that, I'm probably a great example of that being a bit more of a learned activity over time, as opposed to having been born with that mentality. Where I came from when I was a kid, it was, you are who you are, and it is what it is, and it's always going to be that way. And I'm living proof that you can change your thinking and you can change your life as a result of that. Not to sound too new agey, but I mean, it really does ultimately come down to the way my life is kind of played out.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, it's funny when you brought that book up. That for me, that book was mind-blowing, and it was really and what she talks about in the book is she talks about the fact that you can be different kinds of mindsets in different areas of your life, which I thought was interesting. It's like, from an athletic perspective, and I know you're into sports, I was always a growth mindset, but maybe in art I wasn't. I was, oh gosh, I'm just a bad artist. Well, in reality, that's a mindset. And so that was, I totally agree. That was a really interesting book. I highly recommend it.
The last premise, Curb, that I kind of thought was important that came out of that book was, my analysis of the information that I got was really boiled down to one of two assignments that you may make to yourself from a mental perspective, and that's I am who I am, or I am who I'm becoming. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a very simple and basic premise that any person could ask themselves when it comes to the different aspects of their lives. And the beauty of it is I don't think there's a wrong answer in either of those scenarios. It's a matter of, are there places in your life that you'd rather be something different than what you are? And can you assign that notion of I am who I'm becoming in that sense versus in some ways morality and ethics and other things like that? You may say I am who I am in that regard. So really interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's really good. So you and I have gotten to know each other not only in real life, but also through social. And I follow you on LinkedIn, and you've put some great pieces out on LinkedIn. It seems like you're in tune with the concept of content marketing. Why do you think this should be a part of people's or brands' overall strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think you and I are a classic example of perhaps having found one another via content and then developing a personal relationship, which, if you're talking about a case study for the way that networking should occur in the world today, I really think that yours and mine would fit into that example of how things might occur. And to me, content from a strategy perspective is important for a couple of reasons. You mentioned LinkedIn, and I remember I started selling before the internet in the mid-90s, and the thing that we were always taught by our old school sales managers was to immediately try to find some common ground between you and somebody that you were going to have a discussion with, so that that person would have an opportunity to evaluate you within the crucible of that common ground discussion, so that if you're speaking Greek and they speak Spanish, but both of you speak French, you've found a language in which you can communicate. So we were trained pretty early on to try to find those connection opportunities when you were meeting a new person. And to me, what LinkedIn and different social platforms have done for us in the world today is it's eliminated the need for us to have to try to do that in a snapshot. And it gives you the opportunity, by virtue of what you can learn about somebody before you even meet them, to have a chance to sort of evaluate whether you're going to know, like, or trust them before you ever even really start dealing with them. And to me, if you put content out there that's a reflection of who you are as a business person, why you would be credible to that potential person from what they're looking for, and a display of some of your expertise, it gives prospects and suspects and hell, even some of your clients, an opportunity to know you in a way that they probably wouldn't be able to know you otherwise. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of that's important. And, to me, that's an expansion of what we as salespeople were able to do originally. So to me, that's why producing content is important. But then, what the internet has done is, even for me in the role that I'm doing today, I'm using the internet all the time to try to figure out who might I talk to about specific topics that are pertinent to what I'm trying to get accomplished at this very moment. And if I can show up in the search results of some of those queries as someone who's credible in that space, that's going to move me to the sort of the front of the food chain when it comes to people that that prospect might seek out to do business with. So it's, all of those things are an investment in lead generation and lead conversion, really, in basic salesman's terms. And if you're not doing it, that's fine. But remember, I always feel like our job as salespeople is to be able to have what we're able to do apply to as broad of a prospect base as possible. And the only real way to broaden your prospect base today is to use these tools to your advantage so that you can achieve the greatest width possible. And if you don't do it, you can still be successful, but you're going to do it with a far narrower group of prospects than you would if you don't.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I guess it leads to my final question, really, because, both by being willing to try new things and being willing to stick your neck out in content marketing, in order to do that, you need to be willing to look at things differently. And I always value people who are original thinkers. and are willing to look at old industries or old situations with a new perspective. I think you do that. Why do you think that's important?
I really think it comes down to sort of the basic similar tenet of what we were talking about in fixed mindset versus growth mindset, and it's there's a concept in that book that talks about people often are on two different paths. One of them is a passion for learning, and that's seeking out more and continued inputs and stimuli from an information perspective in order to continue to get better, versus a hunger for approval, which is all I ever want to do is what I do well and have the people that I work with see me as being good at what I do. And whether or not you choose one path or the other, I think oftentimes will dictate whether or not you want to look at things from a different perspective. And in this instance, I would tell you, I don't know how, I don't know why, but very early on in my career, I always was looking for ways to do things better and faster and more efficiently. And really it was based on being lazy. One of my first jobs, I was able to read the newspaper every afternoon because I could get all of my work done in the morning because I created a really efficient process to do that. But instead of just being really good at that job for the rest of time, I parlayed that into, hey, I want to get a promotion, So I used my efficiency as a means by which to improve my career. And, I've really spent the rest of my professional life doing things similarly. And I think that lends itself to a personal desire to continuously want to look at things from a different perspective. But I really think it does boil down to that whole notion of, are you really trying to learn every day, or are you really just trying to get the approval of the people around you for being good at what you do?
Yeah. Yeah. So be willing to fail, right?
Yeah. And, take the lesson from failure. And, a lot of this, I feel like in some ways feels like, a giant big self-help video. But at the same time, I feel like in my personal career, I'm a living example of what's possible if you're willing to sort of give yourself over to these concepts. And, I'm no better than any other guy. I didn't graduate from college. I don't have a fancy degree. I'm just somebody who worked hard and continuously wanted to be better and do things differently. And it's led to success for me personally.
That's great stuff, man. Thanks so much for being a part of the show. But I do give everybody a chance to ask me a question. So I'll let you fire away. I don't know what it's going to be.
The most uncomfortable moment of every video. I watch you wince every single time you ask this, you open it up for this question. So Kirby, again, thinking of it from the content perspective, let's think about this video series itself and the fact that, you've gotten a few episodes in the can now, and I personally have expressed to you how impressed I am with what you're doing. But for Hasseman as an organization, how does this series really fit into your overall marketing mix? And then how are you trying to measure its effectiveness?
Well, great question. And so what I would say about it is a couple things. One of the things that we put up goals for the year each year. And we talk about, there's sales goals, and there's adding team members, and there's profitability goals. And they're just right over here. But one of the things I wanted to do is to increase our company's national recognition for some of the things that we were doing. And I think that one of the ways to do that is to increase, quite frankly, my personal brand within that. And I think this show does a couple different things. Obviously, it creates content that I think will be valuable. I think it does put us in an expert and a credible position, like you had mentioned. I think it also helps us show clients the way to do it,
Yes.
and to do it and to lead by example. As for measurement, candidly, I really don't know yet. This is a brand new experiment for us, and I think that when you try something like this, you mentioned you have to be willing to fail, but I also think you have to be willing to have patience.
Right.
And so I told you we had several episodes ready to go, so that when we got going, I wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to continue it. I think that what happens is a year from now, we'll be able to say, oh, okay, so that led us to here. And I think when you're starting a new endeavor like this, you have to be willing to kind of put in that kind of time before you really realize exactly how you're going to measure it. And that's, and not every endeavor is the same, but I think when you're doing something like this, it's a long-term play.
Totally agree. And I would say specifically that the fact that you have a plan and you know the time frame in which you want to allow for measurement are really two of the most important aspects of when you start a new piece of content like this, is to not expect that, you know, if you're not getting 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 views of a piece of content that you've created, that doesn't mean that you're failing. It means that you're on a path towards being the best at what you're trying to do as possible, and starting from that perspective of knowing that that's what you're trying to accomplish oftentimes is more important than any real measurable result you'll get in the beginning. Because the thing that I would tell you from my personal perspective is, think about these questions that people are asking of you. If you cut these out and make a loop of all of the questions that people have asked you and then put that out as a piece of content, anybody who wants to do business with you will know all about Kirby and Hasseman marketing before they ever have a chance to talk to you. So I applaud you for it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. And I appreciate you being a part of the show. That's going to wrap up another edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. We will see you next time.